Okay, now we're going to talk about painting up your dirt textured base that you've created with sand. And I'm going to use three colors for painting this. Battlefield Brown is going to be my base coat color. These are P3 paints, so dark brown if you will. A dark tan, or for P3, Beast Tide, is going to be my first dry brushed highlight. And my highest highlight will be Menoth White base. And so these are the three colors I'm going to use. That's like a tan. So if you don't use P3 paints, that's dark brown, a light brown or dark tan, and a light tan or beige. Alright, is what you're looking for. Now, when I paint up the base of my miniature, starting with my base coat, one thing nice about sand, which this is an advantage of adding sand later and not priming over it, is if I put a little water on my brush and grab a little paint, you're going to notice as I apply it to the base, let me actually get a little more water in there. So what's going to happen is it's going to naturally travel. See, the paint is going beyond the tip of my brush and it's soaking into the sand. If I have a little water on my brush or water down my paints, alright, I want you to see this on this side. What's going to happen is as I apply the brush, the paint will soak into the sand and travel a little bit beyond the tip of my brush. Now what that allows me to do, which is really nice, is not paint on my miniature by mistake. I basically, with watered down paint, let the sand absorb or soak up the paint, and then it naturally travels up to the edge of the miniature without me having to actually put my brush next to his feet or whatnot. And that's kind of nice. So within no time, I've got my miniature painted up and I've not painted over the parts of him that I didn't want to paint over, like hit his legs or feet or cape or anything else that's close to the ground. Alright, so that's, the base coat's really simple. Now, there's going to come a time with dry brushing and applying this base coat that you get a little over the edge of the lip where you don't want it. That's not a problem in the end because we can dress that up with a little black paint at the end of the, or however you want to do the outside of your base at the end of the process. So I'm going to let this dry, of course, and then I'm going to talk about dry brushing on these other two shades to give it the natural dirt texture that you're looking for your base to have. So I'll do that in just a second. Okay, now that my base coat of Battlefield Brown is dry, it's time to go on to dry brushing the sand texture to bring out the details of the grit. So, as mentioned before, I'm going to use a medium brown highlight, or Beast Tide in P3 terms. It's really like a dark tan. And a light tan, or in P3 terms, this Menoth White base, which I like. You use Jackbone, Hammerfall, Khaki, those things will all work too. So, let's do our first dry brush. Now, of course, with dry brushing, what you want to do is have minimal brush on your paint minimal paint on your brush, when you do that. So I'm going to open up my paint jar. If you're using a Vallejo or Reaper dropper bottles, just again squeeze a little onto your palette. Basically the same process. I'm going to get a little paint on my brush and a little more on that, and make sure I'm stroking this on some paper towel until I have minimal pigment on my brush. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and in a sideways motion dry brush this on, and you're hopefully going to be able to tell that some of that pigment starts to show up on the base. It should be a subtle effect, that's what dry brushing is going to do, just to bring out the grit details of that sand. Okay. Now with this step, I don't worry too much about getting a little dry brushed pigment on the boots or feet of the figure, because in theory if they're traveling across some rough, dirty landscape, such as this base represents, they're going to get a little dusty on their shoes. Some people want to be careful and avoid that, but I just think it makes sense if you get a little dust on their shoes. Alright, so we got our first shade of highlight there on the figure. Put them back, close up that paint. Now I'm going to go to my second highlight. Now, of course, if you're doing a batch of figures all at once, you do that first shading, first highlighting on all of them, and then go on to the next shading. But I'm just doing one figure as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my second highlight, which is my Menoth White base. Same process, get a little paint on the brush. I don't need to clean my brush in between this, I'm just dry brushing. So I don't need to get that, I already kind of wiped most of that previous pigment off. So I just go with the same brush, and I want to keep it dry. I don't want to clean it in between and get that brush wet. I go to my second highlight, okay, and I go ahead and dry brush that onto the base of the figure as well. Okay, and the details of that sand grit really starts to pop, and it really starts to look nice. So that's him. He's got his sand texture and natural base, and he is ready to go. He's good to go. As you can see, this Calcite Woodsman. If you see a spot where it's a little darker than others, maybe you didn't get in there dry brushed enough, just go back and touch it up. That's basically it. The last thing I need to do with this figure is I need to get rid of this gray base. Now, if you didn't prime your base earlier, that might be black and ready to go. But odds are, with the dry brushing and even the base coating, you've got a little on the edge somewhere of this figure at some point that needs to be cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is, again, I like these old paint pots with a little poster putty on top. I'm going to stick them back onto that so that I can paint around the edge of that figure with a black paint to clean it up. Now I've got an old Reaper Pro Series faded black, which I love for this, but any black that you like to do around the base of your figures will do. Okay, so I'm going to get that paint ready. Let me get this off screen here. And I'm going to go up, and to finish this figure, I'm going to paint around the base. I'm just finding an appropriate brush for this task here. I think I'll use this one here. And you're going to finish this up by going to that base and covering up the sides, going right up to the edge of your dirt texture. This won't take me long at all. Just zoom in around. Now I'm using a dry brush here. I probably could have used a brush in a little better condition, but oops, off screen, on screen. But you get the idea that I've cleaned that up. Sometimes look at the top, make sure you haven't left any uncovered areas there in between your texture and your base. And that's basically ready to go. Don't want to handle it right now, it's wet. I'm going to let that dry. And then I'm going to pop them off a little later, just about 10-15 minutes. That's going to be dry enough, if not less. And my miniature is going to be ready to go. And the only things I can, if I want to do some steps beyond that, I can. I could add some static grass. I could add some grass tufts. For these Calcite Woodsmen, actually, I'm going to go back and add some snow effect to their bases, which I'll show you in a video down the line, if not very soon. So that's how I'm going to really add another element to them. Theoretically, though, with just the dirt texture base, you could field them, you could consider them finished. I like to dress it up a little bit more, but this guy's, for most people, is going to be considered table ready and ready to deploy in battle. So that's Basing 101, basic dirt texture with sand grit. I hope you found the video helpful, and thanks for watching. This is Garrison signing off for Iron Kingdoms at War and Just the Bases. Happy wargaming, everybody!